So this is a special governance and operations committee meeting. It is Wednesday, July 13th, 2022, and it is 11 o'clock. Please note this is a webinar that will be recorded and it will be available on Zoom on the city's website at a future date. The first item is Parks and Recreation Trails Incredible Farmers Market request for use of Trail Memorial Center kitchen. So I'm unsure who's talking first, but maybe Mr. McClure, are we turning it over to you first or to Tricia?
I think that I'll just sort of lead off, if you will, Your Worship. So just, I know that Council got this presentation on the June, I guess it was early July that we had moved the June meeting, but and so we've been working with the proponent. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and I know that staff have engaged with a caterer to go through the location with the proponents of the Incredible, and just really trying to make sure that whatever we get engaged with here, there's a benefit for all, and I think that we can get there. And I am thinking in the report that's been provided, a lot of that has been coming from the director, Tricia, and so we'll have her speak to it. But I think that it's important for council to realize that there are some pieces that need to be worked through. We are not trying to be a roadblock to these individuals trying to do this, but there is a lot of moving parts and a lot of users of the space, and potentially more as we get outside of COVID. So we're just cognizant as staff that we're here wanting to support and getting some upgraded equipment that can be used not only by Incredible but by others. But again, just reiterating that this is not finished as much as a permission letter is there. There's a lot of fine detail that still needs to be worked through. And I don't know if Tricia's there. I think she is, if she wants to speak anymore.
Yes, thanks, Colin. Happy to walk through the report and certainly entertain any questions. Nice to see you all. Nice to see you, Gina and Mandy. So I will not go through the report in like every detail, but I'll maybe just kind of highlight a few elements to support what Colin was talking about. So maybe just to remind council, so obviously the Incredible Market Group is looking to apply for a grant application to Agriculture Canada, and their grant deadline is this Friday. And as Colin noted, they're looking for a permission letter, which is a requirement of the grant application. The grant does have terms that would have some form of an agreement developed that would provide the user an opportunity to use the space for the 2 years of the funding agreement, and then for 2 years following the funding agreement for a total of 4 years. And as noted, because the kitchen itself is owned and operated by the city, this permission letter is a grant condition. So as Colin noted, there's a host of things that Gina and Audrey was actually present that we started to hash through when we did a site tour again on Friday with the group. And really what this was meant to do was to help people understand the complexities of the ask and to start the wheels turning from an administrative perspective as to what an agreement might look like or what hurdles there might be. And while we didn't want to solve all of these problems as part of our conversation, the idea was to highlight them so that there was some appreciation of the work that would be needed, and to potentially raise any red flags that may come up if there were some showstoppers for either party. So 4.2 itemizes a host of things that, in my opinion, would form details within some form of facility use agreement. These are certainly not the only things that would form details in the use agreement, but I think are ones that might be a little bit unique to this particular ask. So things around hours of access, how equipment repair, maintenance, and replacement would be managed, what it looks like for shared equipment or space versus exclusive equipment or space. So say if there was something that the group brought in that wanted for their sole use of their vendors versus something that may be qualifying as part of a public asset that either our vendors or other users would be able to use, or if any of those things exist. Certainly roles and responsibilities related to the kitchen coordinator that I think we heard Gina speak about at the presentation on July 4th. I think it should be noted that all the parties that participated in the tour on last Friday identified that this is a pivotal issue to sort out, and something that would require potentially a different scope than maybe what Gina originally thought, and certainly something we would have to hash out. Certainly talking about how we would deal with competing interests of space and who or how prioritization of use would be managed. And then any kind of deemed leaseholder improvements, who ultimately owns the asset and is then responsible for it, and what that then looks like as you roll that issue out in relation to management of that asset, recognizing the limited staff resources that we currently have if we're looking to enhance space use for other groups. And then, going back to kind of tying into that is certainly staff roles and responsibilities to make sure that there's some understanding amongst council that really our staff only go into that space a couple of times a year based on events that are going on. And so it would be, I think, a conversation that we would need to have if there was any change to that, recognizing we can barely keep our heads above water as a staff team as it is. So when it comes to space usage, you may recall we clarified a couple of things with Gina's group when we were there on Friday. So they had originally thought there might be 2 spaces that could be used for some of the needs that the group had identified. Both of those spaces, it became clear, were not options for this particular project. We did find one though, and some of you that know the ins and outs of that facility would know it as the old men's change room, which is on the kitchen side of the gymnasium space. And we could allocate that to this group for their exclusive use. They needed to store some dry goods and possibly some other items that we thought that space could be used for. We would obviously lose that space for use for city activities, but we thought that the actual issue related to that would be somewhat minor, and really it would be largely male pickleball players that would be maybe put out, but there are other spaces within the building itself that could be used. So I thought you might like to know that 2 caterers, both which I would say are not currently active caterers within the community, but certainly had lots of knowledge related to catering needs and how the space functions as a caterer, came and participated, and I think they really appreciated that opportunity to be there. They also agreed that the coordinator role was pivotal to the success, and they could see the issues certainly that the city was presenting, and I think also provided some insight to Gina's group. I've provided at the back of the report, so if you flip a little bit past where Colin would have added his commentary, I provided a bit of a list of the types of events that the kitchen has typically seen over the course of time. And, these change and ebb and flow on a yearly basis, and most of them are driven by volunteer groups. And so sometimes those volunteer groups are interested in holding these activities and sometimes they're not. So it really depends on the year, but I thought this would paint a little bit of a picture of the types of use and possibly the degree of use the kitchen could see at any given time. And I kind of classified it as a pre-COVID picture, because obviously in the last few years that has looked incredibly different. So some other details that I think might be helpful for everyone would be, I think there's some, questions or certainly some clarification we would want to have in relation to if there were upgrades to the space, kind of how those are used, and if they're deemed exclusive use, what that looks like for caterers, especially if it's something that is unique or occupies some space in there. Just something we'd want to clarify over time. I'll maybe jump down to item 6, and please stop me if I'm going too quickly for anyone. But I'll jump into maybe the financial considerations. And I've outlined a variety of financial considerations that I knew of at the time. And there may be others, but these are the ones that we kind of had the time to pull together. So, in the Incredible Market has requested that the grant be considered in lieu of rental fees for the space. So I just flagged for people to say, is it important to consider recognizing we have a two-tier system for everything within the recreation fees and charges bylaw? Does anything related to our resident and non-resident rates apply to this situation? I didn't have an answer to that. I just flagged it for people's consideration. Certainly there'll be additional wear and tear on equipment, and the replacement of equipment is currently not contained within our 5-year capital plan. There's, as many of you know who've sat through capital budget meetings, we have an incredible amount of competing priorities, not just within recreation, but within the city as a whole that need to be considered. And certainly if rent is not charged in lieu of grant funding, it would be appropriate to ensure that the items purchased are available for public use, meaning for other third-party usage. There'll be increased energy costs or consumption costs for any type of energy that the kitchen will draw on. We have no known knowledge as to what those fees would be at this time, and we would have to wait until it would probably take 2, 3, or 4 years to even really know what the impact of that is to analyze it over time. As we mentioned before, there are a couple of known capital improvements required in the kitchen space. So the HVAC system serving the space is currently 34 years old and is well past its useful life, and absolutely requires a replacement. The cost, again, based on other HVAC costs that we have that we think are sort of like in size and need, are sitting at about $100,000 at this time. We also know that the floor needs to be replaced, and we've estimated that between $80,000 and $100,000. And of course, there's many unknowns, and official quotes have not been received for those, as they typically are not received until we've prioritized those projects and are ready to proceed. So I mentioned the kitchen coordinator again. I think if you have read the report now, you'll know that if I've mentioned it 3 times, it's probably important. So I just flagged that to for everyone's knowledge. And, as like with any other project, there's always unknown costs that we can't foresee. So our suggestion at this point, as far as like any, I'll call them like leaseholder improvements that the Incredible Market group is considering, that they follow what the city's budgeting processes for these types of projects are, which is to include at least a 15% contingency in their budgeting, so that there's sufficient funds to cover whatever is required. And again, we are unsure, it's early days and it's unknown as to what the draw or expectations of staff resources are. I know the group has identified that, they anticipate that to be minimal. I think we have lots of experience to recognize that we appreciate that that's the goal, and we'd like it to probably land on that goal, but we also know that there's many things that need to be worked out, and draw on time and resources is likely to occur. So I believe maybe I will leave my commentary on the report at that as a summary. I think I've kind of hit the main pieces, unless there's anything that I didn't highlight that people would like me to go back on.
Okay, I'm just going to go CAO McClure and Ms. McIsaac. Is there any other staff comments that you wanted to make before we open the floor to council for questions?
Not for me, Mayor Payson. Again, too interested in what council's comments or questions will be in.
Okay, and Ms. McIsaac?
I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone from council have any questions on this or any comments to make? Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Actually, this is just more directed towards Gina. Gina, how are you progressing with the funding requests?
So we basically have our, and that's an excellent question, because actually yesterday I was been talking to other organizations, and they think we're way far ahead, and I'm thinking we're so far behind, and we are. So we're going to get it done in time. We are still waiting for, so we did have, in addition to the caterers that went through, we also had a Dahl Mechanical and Refrigeration go through. And there are some things that are Cool Tech, and both of them are familiar with the kitchen and have done some work in the kitchen. I think that Tricia can probably verify that. So, and we did that to make sure that everything was operational, that type of thing. So there are some things that we're still waiting for quotes on, because the deep fryer needs replacing. The 2-burner stock pot range isn't working and needs replacing. The range, the reach-in lock-in cooler is finished. It's toast. It's got to be replaced. The sandwich bar needs to be retrofitted. It was done in 2007 last. The flat top 4-top burner is a Quest. It's older. It needs to have a super cleaning. They were concerned if there's still parts. We've requested, talk to Quest, and yes, the parts are available. The gas line that runs behind the stove, the deep fryer, and the stock burner, 2-burner stock pot burner, it needs to be secured and fastened for safety reasons. And the water cooling, and I don't know if this is probably something that is way beyond our repair. So he couldn't get up and take a look at the water cooler because it's on the roof, and of course there's a lot of activity taking place right now, so he couldn't get up there. So but it's actually not code to have that cooling up on the ceiling. And it didn't connect with me until the caterer mentioned that he had some stuff, was doing a catering job, and he had some food in the refrigerator, and something made him go back and take a look at it, because otherwise he wouldn't have normally been there for another day or so. Anyways, he went back and it wasn't working. So that would have been a complete loss. And what it is that if they shut off the cooling for whatever reason and they don't turn it back on, it affects that fridge, that walk-in fridge refrigerator. So there's those kinds of things. So we're just waiting for all of those particular quotes to come in. They're really, really close, actually. So the Rod from, what's the name of it? Cool Tech, said something about just sent a message this morning that their something in their system was down. Anyways, he's going to PDF it to us and send it to us. So hopefully we'll have that today. So basically it's ready to go. We do need the letter of permission, and there's certain things that need to be in that letter of permission, which I've detailed to Tricia what needs to be in that letter. And what else? So we're basically ready to go. Once we get those grants and the permission letter, it can go in by Friday. And so I want to actually thank the Tricia and her staff and city staff, and actually all of council, for being able to bring this together, because a lot of communities weren't able to get even as far as we are because of what's required. So I think that basically there is a big accolades that's should go out to staff and to council. So
Okay, Paul, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just concerned that there was it sounds like there's a list of things to do, but you have a good understanding of the things that are needed.
Yeah, so what we're asking for is, the grant is that we're asking for is 100,000, which is kind of a 75-25 split, 25,000 from Trails Incredible Farmers Market and 75,000 from Ag Canada. And it's broken down into 2 years, 50,000 for each year.
Thanks, Gina.
Okay, Councillor Doby, I see you're off mute. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm off mute now, I believe. Yes. I have a question for Trish. Trish, I know that the flooring and the HVAC system are the two biggest costly items. If we did not proceed with this partnership with Gina and her group, how long do you think we could hold off before we should be looking at that ourselves?
Well, we have flagged it for a number of years, Councillor
I know
Doby. The HVAC unit is, if I showed you pictures, it would not surprise you as to why it needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
The flooring, there was a concern raised by the caterers. I am no health inspector expert by any stretch, but they were concerned that the state of the floor may raise concerns for a health inspector. So I would argue that if there's increased usage beyond, what our events typically are, is, a caterer's in for a day and a half a day, or maybe a day on either side of an event, and then they're gone, versus ongoing use could raise some concerns for in the health inspector world. But again, I don't have any knowledge as to how accurate my statement is. My sense from people who seem to know more about that than I did was that the floor could be flagged and be required to be done as part of this project, if not for other reasons.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Trish.
Okay, Councillor Jones, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I just want to reiterate Gina's comment about the report and the work that the staff have done on this. I appreciate you being so willing to move forward so quickly with it. And just a couple of questions for Trish again. I was looking in the budget, the annual budget for 2022, and the only thing I noticed in there for the Memorial Center, there wasn't anything in this budget for the flooring or the equipment or anything, but there was for the HVAC system. But when I look at it, it's two different, the HVAC system, the unit and the ducting, which was 185,000. And then when you go down and you look at the HVAC, the plant HVAC unit replacement is 100,000. So total it's 285,000, but would that expense be part of the upgrade on the kitchen? That's my first question. Also, I'm looking at the equipment and I kind of see what Gina and Incredible Market wants to do. It's probably a win-win for us because we get all this new equipment and this upgrading only to benefit the kitchen in the Memorial Center. In the end, my understanding, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, please, this equipment stays with the Memorial Center. If, in the future, this didn't continue, the equipment would stay there and be ours, if I'm understanding your presentation correctly. And I think the benefit to the community with this kind of a project in the Memorial Center, in our city, is such a win-win situation. And my fear now is that we've gone this far, and if we don't go through with it, some other committee or community, will pick it up and run with it. And I just think that I'm just really glad that we've gotten this far with it. And of course, I'm supporting the project. But I know that along the way, there's going to be things that come up that we can't foresee right now. And we're going to have to work with, such as with the staffing and the opening of the time that the facilities open and everything that Tricia said. It's like a changing document. It's a working document. It's different for our community and it's a little bit scary moving forward. But I think that we all want to work towards it. And I'm really hoping that, we can find a way to continue forward. So I kind of went off track there, but I really want Trish to answer those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'm happy to. So the two HVAC projects that you identified in the arena have nothing to do with the actual kitchen space. So the $185,000 project is the HVAC unit serving the old library space and the ductwork that had to be changed to support the changes to that HVAC unit to serve the needs of that space. And the other one, I think you called it plant HVAC, something like that. So that was an imminent issue that arose as part of the capital budget planning process, where the HVAC unit serving the plant room, so the ice plant room in the arena failed. So not unlike what could very likely happen to the kitchen HVAC unit at any point in time, we have close to probably over $1.5 million worth of HVAC pieces of equipment at the arena. The kitchen is one. So you will see another HVAC project as part of the Trail Aquatic and Leisure Center filter room. And we've done other projects even throughout the last 4-year term of council. So it's an ongoing issue that is, the units are expensive, they fail, the environments they're in can, increase or decrease the lifespan that they have. So yes, I can see where it would be a bit confusing. As far as the win-win part of your conversation, I agree with you, Councillor Jones. I do think there can be a win-win to this, so long as we can come up with an agreement that works for all parties. I think that's the piece is, I don't think we would have entertained this to the degree that we have if we didn't feel that were to be true across the board and on multiple different levels. And there are some things that are non-negotiable, and I just need to make sure it's clear that things like access to the facility when there's not a paid operator on site is a showstopper. We cannot, under any circumstance by regulation, have people in the facility if there is not a trained, certified employee on site when the ice plant is in operation. So that is and as you know, the kids rink, the plan is to have that ice surface in play until the end of July, when the upgrades to the kids rink happen, which would ultimately land about 10 days of a year where there would be no ice plant in operation. So there are a few things like that we helped Gina's group sort of understand the kind of the idiosyncrasies that come with this request in a building that has multiple other services at play. Did I answer all your questions? I tried to write them down.
CAO McClure, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And just a couple of pieces, just so we're, this isn't just a City of Trail. It's the fact that the ice plant and the tragedy in Fernie that causes the, because of the ammonia plant issue is the reason why. So it's not just sort of a bylaw or a rules for the City of Trail as regards to being in the building with the potential with the ammonia plant there. It is just a WCB and a recognition that we never want to have somebody in there in case there was something wrong with the plant and if it's operational. So that's why, just so everyone's aware on that. I think maybe they are. And then secondly, as far as the question in regards to the equipment, yes, I believe when I read the application from Agricultural Canada, that as long as the grantee is successful and carries on, that yes, the equipment would stay there. But quite possibly, not that I necessarily would expect it to happen, but they're also with the fact that there's sort of this requirement of 4 years, is that if say something was to go wrong in year 1, it is quite possible that there could be some sort of, again, however unlikely it would be, there would be some sort of reclaiming of equipment that went in if the funder so desired, if those that applied for the grant were unsuccessful and maybe only saw 1 year out of the 4 kind of thing. So just council be aware, it's highly unlikely, but just being aware that as long as things were to carry on, then yes, these sorts of things would be available for the public and be available for the city. But if it was a shorter period than that, all bets are off.
Okay, Councillor Jones, did you have your hand up for another question?
I did, but it was answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Does Councillor Gattafoni Robinson go ahead? And you're on mute?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Gina, with all that list that you mentioned that needs to be done in the kitchen, how are you prioritizing which is the most important and which is not the most important? Because that's a huge list and it's more than $50,000.
Okay, so all of those are a priority and they'll all meet the budget, our requirement of 50,000.
They will?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say that the deep fryer is at the bottom of the list.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll just say that definitely an interesting proposal and definitely complex. And I think as elected officials, you know, our lens is that we want to do good for the community, but we also need to protect our taxpayers. And there's always usually ancillary costs that come with these types of projects. And you know, there might be some decisions on budget that need to be made in the future, and hopefully that won't be the case. I was heartened also with CAO McClure's comments about the Columbia Basin Trust, and they seem to have some granting for a similar line of work. So it's nice to know that there's some other options out there and similar programs that we might be able to tap into should we need to. So with that, I'll just one last call for any questions from the floor. Councillor Jones, did you have your hand up again?
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
I did actually. I'm sorry. I kind of put it up. I wanted to move the recommendation, but sorry, you were still speaking. So.
Yep, I was just going to say if there's no other questions, we can go to move the recommendation. So is there any other questions from council? I just want to make sure that we're covered off here. Seeing no more questions. Okay, we have Councillor Jones moving the recommendation as listed to provide a permission letter. It is quite lengthy. I'm not sure if it needs to be read. CAO McClure, do you want me to read that for the sake of transparency and just?
I think we should probably do that. Yes.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council provide a permission letter indicating their support of the Trail Incredible Farmers Market's request to perform leasehold improvements to the Trail Memorial Center kitchen to enable their use of the facility on a non-exclusive basis as a commercial community kitchen for local food production and processing for a 4-year term. And that if the grant application to Agriculture Canada is successful, council agreed to commit to the Trail Incredible Farmers Market use of the kitchen facility without further rent to be paid, and that it be agreed and understood by the Trail Incredible Farmers Market that the facility use agreement would have to be finalized prior to acceptance of funds. So Councillor Jones, are you moving that recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, do I have someone to second that recommendation? Councillor Dobie, thank you. Last call for comments or questions. Seeing none, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried unanimously. Okay, there you go. And that
Thanks,
is it for our agenda today. It is 11:34 and we'll call for adjournment.